GB News, Monday to Thursday from 4 p.m. till 6 p.m. We don't lecture to you or try to tell you what to think. We do a deep delve into a topic with views from across the range of debate, therefore leaving you, the viewer, to make up your own mind. Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, 4 till 6, Monday to Thursday. You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
And welcome to On the Money. It's your daily weekday dose of economics, business and consumer news. I'm Liam Halligan, and for the next hour we'll be talking about all things pensions and savings, amid reports that planned increases in the basic state pension age shouldn't go ahead. That and a whole host of subjects with people who really know their stuff. But first, it's the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date at 1 o'clock. £1 billion is being made available by the Treasury to support businesses most impacted by Omicron across the UK. Industry leaders have been calling on the government for further support as the hospitality sector suffers increasing cancellations over the festive period. The new measures include one-off grants of up to £6,000 for hospitality and leisure firms in England. The government is also going to cover statutory sick pay for those who test positive or have to self-isolate for small and medium-sized employers in the UK. £30 million will be added to the Culture Recovery Fund to help museums and theatres in England. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon is due to give an update this afternoon on any further restrictions after an increase in daily COVID cases. Meanwhile, in England, new COVID restrictions are unlikely to be introduced before Christmas, but the Prime Minister says the government won't rule out further action. The man accused of terrorism and of fatally stabbing Conservative MP Sir David Amess has pleaded not guilty. Ali Harbour Ali is charged with the murder of Sir David during a constituency surgery in Essex in October. The 25-year-old is also charged with preparing acts of terrorism between May 2019 and September of this year. A full trial is expected to be held in March. Now, rail operators are running reduced timetables in the run-up to Christmas because of COVID-related staff shortages. Dozens of train journeys have been cancelled by cross-country every day this week. Avanti West Coast has removed all peak ticket restrictions over Christmas to help spread demand. There's also a reduced service across Southern, Thameslink and Great Northern networks until the end of the day on Christmas Eve. Greater Anglia have cancelled a number of trains, and Northern Rail and ScotRail are all running amended timetables. The Trans-Pennine Express is warning of short-notice cancellations over the next fortnight. Well, the World Health Organization is urging leaders and individuals to make difficult decisions now, declaring that 2022 must be the year the pandemic ends. The Director General is warning that the Omicron variant is spreading significantly faster than the Delta strain of coronavirus. It's already been identified in 89 countries across the world. He's also urged caution over the festive period, saying an event cancelled is better than a life cancelled.
2022 must be the year we end the pandemic. But it must also be the year that all countries invest in preventing a future disaster on this scale. In the year ahead, WHO is committed to doing everything in our power to end the pandemic and to beginning a new era in global health.
President Joe Biden has deployed 1,000 military personnel to support hospitals in the US as COVID-19 emissions rise. The Omicron variant is now the dominant strain in the country, accounting for 73% of new infections. The national rate suggests more than 650,000 Omicron cases occurred in the last week. The White House press secretary reiterated the importance of being vaccinated.
Who choose to remain unvaccinated, he'll issue a stark warning and make clear unvaccinated individuals will continue to drive hospitalizations and deaths. That is not trying to scare people, or maybe it is trying to make clear to people in the country what the risks are here of not being vaccinated.
Dubai's ruler has been ordered to pay £554 million to settle a custody battle with his ex-wife over their 2 children. The leader will have to pay the largest sum to ever be granted by a UK court in such a case. The High Court judge ruled the bulk of the payout is for the children's education and lifetime security to address the grave risk posed to them by their father. £251 million will be paid to his ex-wife for the upkeep of her British homes and for future security. Now, Big Ben will finally chime on New Year's Eve with all the faces of famous clock tower on display for the first time in 4 years. The Elizabeth Tower and the bell mechanism have undergone the biggest restoration project in their 160-year history. The bell will be struck 12 times to mark the start of 2022 as the project to restore Westminster's Elizabeth Tower nears its end. You are right up to date. I'll bring you the latest headlines in half an hour. For now, On the Money with Liam.
Coming up on The Money today. Now, around 15 million of us, that's a third of all UK adults, have no pension savings at all. Britain has a pretty low basic state pension, which puts pressure on all of us to put money aside in a private or workplace pension too. So at a time when interest rates are so low, how do we encourage more saving for old age? We'll have a grown-up discussion with people who really know their stuff. Plus, my in-depth Money Talks interview today is with Alex Shepherd, CEO of Vatic, a predictive health company which hopes to revolutionise healthcare. He'll be telling me about new technology that, in his words, will finally enable community healthcare to be proactive and data-driven. That's later in the show. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. Do you have a retirement savings plan? Are you struggling to encourage your kids to save? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @GBNews. Stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're on The Money. Now, before we continue with our show, let's look at some breaking news just out from Her Majesty's Treasury. GB News has been told that businesses in the hospitality and leisure sectors in England will be eligible for one-off grants of up to £6,000 per premises, and the government will also cover the cost of statutory sick pay for COVID-related absences for small and medium-sized employers across the UK. This news is just in. GB News political correspondent Tom Harwood joins me in the studio now. Tom, you and I have literally just glanced at these headlines as Rosie was reading out the news there. £1 billion. £1 billion. Not a lot, is it?
It's not a lot, but it potentially is not to cover that much time. Remember, this isn't funding that's going to cover restrictions. This is about those cancelled bookings, particularly in the run-up to Christmas, but maybe just after. Lots of people no longer going out to have drinks, to go for dinner, to go to the theatre, to all of these sorts of things, mainly because they don't want to catch COVID in the run-up to Christmas. So this £1 billion, this £6,000, up to £6,000 per hospitality business may well only be needed to cover several weeks, because it could well be the case that by the time we're through into January, we're past the peak of Omicron, the sort of hysteria around this, we're past the worst of it, and businesses can then go on trading as they did before. So this is really a stopgap measure, and there has been quite a lot of political pressure for this money, not least from businesses, but also from devolved administrations who've been pointing out the stresses and the strains that hospitality in particular has been under.
A couple of issues jump out to me as I scanned the Treasury embargoed press release. One is, what is a hospitality business? If you're a catering company making sandwiches for a wedding company, are you a hospitality business? We don't know. Also, the other thing that strikes me, Tom, is that it's going to be very difficult to get this stuff out the door quickly, so there's likely to be quite a lot of fraud.
Potentially so, and also there's this qualifier of the businesses most in need. Well, who decides who's most in need? That sounds like quite a bureaucratic
Who decides what's a small and medium-sized company? It's meant to be just for SMEs. Who knows?
Right, exactly. So there's all of this detail to work through, and that could mean that it's quite a bit of time until people actually get their cash. As you rightly say, that might well leave a door open for fraud, but it also might mean that businesses who don't know if they're going to get this money or not are going to have to make difficult decisions to do with their staff, to do with their opening hours, until they get that cash.
My best guess is that we won't see restrictions before Christmas now. Obviously, no one knows for sure, not even the Prime Minister knows for sure. But I do expect Parliament to be recalled now between Christmas and the New Year. Is that what you're picking up to?
That seems to be the consensus. It seems that Cabinet was successful yesterday in that almost 3-hour-long meeting from 2 p.m.
Pushing back against Sage.
Saying they want to see more data, they want to have more time. Now, of course, the argument against that is there's not going to be much more time. And if we wait for full data, it will be too late to act. But they seem to have won that argument to wait for more data, which really might close the doors after the horse has bolted. If we have Christmas as this big crucially intergenerational mixing weekend. A lot of people in my generation have caught COVID in the last week. If they go off and see their grandparents this weekend, that could cause a problem for the NHS. But it seems that there won't be formal restrictions. There may be advice. There may be a press conference, who knows, and more advice for families. But I don't think there'll be legislation, certainly not before next week. But yes, I have been hearing that the MPs are fully expecting, they're cancelling plans for next week because they may well be recalled to London.
Tom Harwood, thanks a lot for joining us here on The Money. That was Tom Harwood, and we'll be hearing from Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor. He's got a full statement later in the show. Now, plans to raise the state pension age from 66 should be shelved because we're not living as long as previously expected. That's according to a new report from the consultancy LCP. Until as recently as 2001, men received their basic state pension, currently £179.60 a week, from the age of 65, and women from the age of 60. Over the last 2 decades, those ages have been adjusted to reflect rising longevity and equality. So now both men and women receive the basic state pension from the age of 66. Under current plans, the age at which people are eligible for that basic state pension will go up to 67 by 2028, and then eventually to 68. But this new study from LCP says the rise in life expectancy we've seen over recent decades has now stalled, with the consultancy arguing the state pension starting age should stay where it is for the foreseeable future. Cancelling these increases in the state pension age, or even delaying them by 20 years or so, would benefit around 20 million of us born in the 1960s, 70s and early 80s. But it will cost the Treasury a pretty penny, an estimated £200 billion. In the pensions world, tiny policy tweaks can make a huge financial difference. There's certainly a debate to be had about if and when the basic state pension age should rise further. In the here and now, though, millions of us save for our retirement, so we receive a private or workplace pension in old age, as well as the basic state pension. Around 57% of us are investing in ISAs, that's individual savings accounts, and pensions for our retirement. Around 18% of men invest in ISAs and only 7% of women. Around 12% say we're investing in property for our retirement, and another 12% of us are relying on, well, inheritance and or winning the lottery. Now, this research, compiled by moneymagpie.com and PensionBee, also highlights that around 30% of so-called Generation Z, that is 18 to 24-year-olds, say they'll consider investing in property and ISAs to fund their retirement. Now, signs that more of us are saving, that's good news. The UK, along with many advanced countries, is an ageing society and we need to put cash aside. But the glaring problem, though, around 15 million people, a third of all adults, have no pension savings at all, and they'll rely solely on the basic state pension. Given that we've got one of the lowest state pensions in the Western world, that makes for a bleak retirement. And that's our on-the-money question today. As the cost of living rises, how do we encourage more saving for old age? Here at On the Money, we have grown-up conversations with people who really know their stuff. We have Tom McPhail, the pensions expert at the Lancat, a financial services company. Good to see you, Tom. We have Becky O'Connor, head of pensions and savings at Interactive Investor. And in the studio, Jasmine Birtles, Miss MoneyMagpie.com herself. We're discussing her research. She put this research together on how people are planning to pay for their retirement. Let's go first of all to Becky O'Connor, head of pensions and savings at Interactive Investor. Becky, just sketch it out, the landscape. 15 million of us with no pension savings at all. It's not a good situation, is it?
It's really not, no. And it's actually quite an unexpectedly large number. You know, we've had auto-enrolment now, so the expectation is that most people who are in the workplace have a pension. But from the Money Magpie research and some of our own as well, we know that that's a huge, not having a pension is a huge issue. Self-employed people obviously don't benefit from auto-enrolment. And actually there's still this cohort of people in their 40s and late 40s and 50s now who have worked their whole lives, have had a job, but haven't necessarily been auto-enrolled in a pension because they missed out for the most part of their working life on the auto-enrollment rules. So we know where the vulnerable spots are, but the difficulty now is getting everybody up to the same standard and closing that gap. And obviously that's very hard if somebody's closer to retirement. So yes, it is a really big problem, but it affects certain groups more than others.
Tom McPhail, good to have you on the show. It strikes me as somebody that tries to keep a close eye on the pensions landscape that, yes, there's more savings going on, but there's still this big rump of people, maybe a growing group of people with no pension savings whatsoever. They're going to have to rely on the basic state pension, which is, isn't it, by international standards, pretty low.
So most of the people at approaching retirement today are mostly, not all, but mostly okay, because we've had pretty generous workplace pensions over the preceding 30, 40 years. So still a lot of people reaching retirement with defined benefit pensions. The problems come over the next 20 years, where increasingly we're going to have people reaching retirement who haven't had the opportunity to build up decent retirement savings pots for themselves. And as you know, Liam, the thing that really makes the most difference here is time. So almost counterintuitively, I'm less worried about the younger generations, people in their 20s and 30s. We've got some time to find solutions for them. We can keep building on auto-enrollment, keep building on engagement and find ways to help them. The ones that really worry me more than anything are the people in their 40s today who've probably not saved enough right now and for whom time is running out to build up a decent retirement pot. And, if we're lucky, some of them will have bought a house and they can, to some extent, rely on housing equity. I was really struck by one of the numbers you quoted earlier on, that you got the same proportion of people relying on a lottery win as relying on housing wealth, which just looks a bit bonkers to me. It's just, so I think there's a lot of cultural stuff we need to work on here, people's attitudes to savings. Just one final point. It's been really interesting seeing the way people's attitudes to mental health and talking about mental health have shifted over just the last few years. Really big change that's gone on there, really positive. There's no reason why we can't make the same kind of changes of people's attitudes to saving and investing. I think there's evidence that it is possible to make a difference in this space.
That's what you're trying to do, Jasmine Birtles. You're trying to get a conversation going with this research.
Yes, absolutely. Conversations so we can all talk about it. And, you know, as they both said, the young people actually are starting to look at this. And we were very interested to see that 22% of Gen Zers were interested
18
in
to 24-year-old.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So they were into investing. Now, I think this is sort of the Bitcoin effect, Reddit, GameStop, you know, it's all quite fun for them. But I think also they are thinking to themselves, that probably when they retire, there won't be a state pension. Whereas today's pensioners and maybe today's 50, 60-year-olds, they just assumed, understandably, that the state would look after them. Something that Tom mentioned there, absolutely key in understanding this debate, the demise of workplace pensions, occupational pensions. Tom mentioned defined benefit pensions, which were the gold standard, also money purchase occupational pensions, which are more linked to the stock market, but still worth having. For people below 50, they barely exist these days, outside of the public sector, of course. Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it is basically defined contribution. But so you put money in and you hope that it does well by the time you get to retire. I mean, as Becky said, the fact that we've had auto-enrolment has really helped a lot of people. If you're in work, if you're employed, if you're self-employed, there isn't, you kind of have to do it
And more of us
yourself.
are with the gig economy, right? That's the danger. We've all got... So many of us in the gig economy, there's a whole generation of people, the majority of them haven't bought homes because they can't afford homes. The under 45s, we've discussed that a lot. What's going to happen to them when they retire? They can't afford rent and they don't own a home.
It's very tough. And I think, you know, this is one of the reasons why the government a few years ago brought out LISAs, lifetime ISAs. So if you're under 40, you can put up to $4,000 a year into a lifetime ISA, and the government adds in another 25%. So you could get another
And then you get it tax-free.
Yeah, which I think is, you know, a pretty good deal, absolutely. So that's a help. But I think also that a lot of people under 40 realise that they are on the back foot. So you've got quite a few now thinking, OK, where can I put my money where it's going to make some money? But there is still a huge cohort that doesn't do that, and we want to get through to them.
You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, we'll keep this discussion going with Tom McPhail, pensions expert at the Landcap, Becky O'Connor of Interactive Investor, and, of course, Jasmine Birtles of MoneyMagpie.com. Your emails are flooding in. This is an important topic. Many of you can sense that. I'll be reading out some of those shortly. Stay with us. You're On the Money.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there and welcome to your Tuesday forecast. Here are your headlines. Generally a lot of cloud today, a few showers lurking across the far north of Scotland, but we will see some brighter moments. High pressure still in charge just for Tuesday before things become a bit more mobile from the west through Wednesday and into the Christmas weekend. And what that means, outbreaks of rain, but for today it is mostly dry. Now we will see some holes in the cloud. West Wales, western parts of Scotland seeing perhaps even some sunshine and some brighter moments coming through further east as the cloud overturns. A keen breeze towards the West Country as well as Northern Ireland. Temperatures here around 7 or 8, but struggling further east, 4 to 6 degrees Celsius. Now through this evening and overnight, notice some cloud breaks towards the south, slowly moving their way northwards as well. So temperatures will plummet under starry skies, a fairly widespread frost away from Northern Ireland and the western periphery of Wales as well as the West Country. Temperatures holding up here and certainly through the latter part of the night, thickening cloud for Northern Ireland will bring with it the onset of some patchy rain. Elsewhere, despite the fact it will be a frosty start to the day, it will be bright. Some sunshine, the sunshine turning hazy through the day as that cloud slowly thickens from the west. And I notice this rain moves up towards western parts of Scotland through the afternoon and a wet day for Northern Ireland. Some showers then for the west of Wales through the latter part of the day. Elsewhere, it's a mostly dry end to Wednesday. Now through Wednesday evening and into the nighttime period, that rain continues its passage northwards. Hill snow will be an issue across the Scottish mountains, and you can see a few showers across the western side of Wales as well as England. Temperatures holding up, perhaps some pockets of frost as we head through the latter part of the night towards the southeast. And here's your outlook as we head into Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Mild for most with some rain, colder in the north.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. Today we're discussing pensions after a new report from the consultancy LCP says we should shelve plans to raise the state pension age from 66 because we're not living as long as previously expected. Plus, new research from moneymagpie.com shows there are signs among some of us of a savings uptick. So we're discussing how can we encourage more to save for old age. I'm still joined by my expert panel. Let's go back to Becky O'Connor, Head of Pensions and Savings at Interactive Investor. Becky, do you see a sense among younger people that they should be saving more for their pensions? That's certainly what Jasmine is picking up in her moneymagpie.com survey. I wondered if you're seeing that at the sharp end where private pension savings are actually bought and sold.
Yeah, we absolutely are. So Interactive Investor, we have the number of younger customers using the platform to invest in both ISAs and SIPs has been rising over the last year in particular. And I think Jasmine's right to point out that the kind of TikTok investment trend may also be encouraging people to think about investing in general and investing in a pension, and also this sense that the state pension might not be there for them. Young people feel like they're responsible for their own futures and they've got to do something about it. And, they're profoundly disillusioned, actually, about the state pension. And that may be prompting them to invest as much as possible in both ISAs and pensions, as much as they can anyway, because obviously your salaries are lower when you're in your early 20s. But it's very encouraging. And if that's the silver lining of the kind of TikTok, Reddit, GameStop craze that we saw earlier this year of people betting on GameStop shares, then that's a good thing. And it's great that people are starting to understand that a pension is actually an investment in the stock market. And I think one of the things that's helped that as well is this kind of growing awareness of sustainable pensions and investing in saving the planet through your pension, which is sort of growing awareness there this year as well that we've seen among users of the platform. So there are encouraging signs. And as Tom says, it's not so much the younger generation who are kind of switched on to investment that we're worried about. It's probably those who missed out on both this trend and auto-enrolment that is perhaps where the concern should be.
If you had a couple of minutes in an elevator and a lift with the Prime Minister or the Pension Secretary, what do you think is the policy change we need to make to really get pension saving moving, particularly among those 15 million of us with no pension savings whatsoever?
So, really good question, Liam. Engaging people with retirement savings is hugely challenging, and that's where the genius success of auto-enrolment came in, the recognition that we can hector people and we can tell people again and again that you need to save for retirement. We can send expensive salesmen out to persuade people to save for retirement. Actually, the best intervention was just to put everybody in a pension, and everyone went, oh, okay, yeah, fair enough, thanks for that. And interestingly, picking up on Becky's point, the opt-out rates of people who've been put into a pension through auto-enrolment were much lower amongst the younger generation. So young people stayed in pensions. The opt-out rates were higher amongst the 40 and particularly the 50-somethings, which I think is interesting in itself. Coming back to your question, the pension system is a mess. And Jasmine referenced the lifetime ISA earlier on. You know, it's a good savings policy. It was a bit of a fudge from George Osborne in 2016 when he tried to review the pension system. But the incentives, the tax relief, the restrictions, the controls, it's horrible. It's a mess. You know, trying to just put simple clear messages in front of people, persuasive messages to say, if you do this, you will get that. Here's a clear incentive. Do this, you'll get a top up from the government. You know, it doesn't work under the current system. So auto-enrolment kind of worked, a bit of a top up from the employer, fantastic. But in answer to your question, I would just, given a magic wand, I'd scrap 90% of the pension rules and I'd start again with something simpler and clearer and more compelling.
Amen to that. Jasmine, you and I have talked in the studio a lot about the cost of living crisis that's coming. Inflation's at 5.1%. It's going to go up more in the new year. It doesn't look good, does it, for people who aren't yet pension saving? I mean, how do you think, with all your experience of on moneymagpie.com, we get to that 15 million share, a third of all adults who have no money put aside for retirement?
Yeah, it's a very good point. And I suspect that many of the people that Tom mentioned are female, that they are mothers, they're often single mothers, and they are using every penny at the moment to look after the family. So this, I think, is one of the reasons why we tend to see that women have lower rates of saving than men. Obviously, they often earn less as well. There are all sorts of reasons. I mean, one thing that we've mentioned is that there are benefits. So if you really cannot, if you've got getting to pension age and you really cannot save anymore, it's worth going to entitledto.com, turntous.org. They have calculators for benefits. You can find out if there are extra benefits. They also have grants. But I think, you know, going forward for the younger people, the middle and you know, coming to retirement, really just getting an understanding of why it's important and even
and making
small
a
amounts.
start.
Yeah,
making a start is so important.
Any age.
Isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we've done this book with Pension Bee called "Help! I Have No Retirement Savings. What Do I Do?" And many that is in response to actual emails that we've had going, "Help! You know, I'm in my 50s. I'm in my 60s. I have no retirement savings." And I say, start where you are, even if it's a small amount. Start with what you've got, because it will build up over time.
Well, we will return to this subject, Jasmine, with you and others in the new year. Thanks to my guest, Tom McPhail, pensions expert at the financial services company The Langcat, Becky O'Connor of Interactive Investor, and, of course, Jasmine Birtles, MissMoneyMagpie.com. None of us are giving you financial advice. We're here having a general discussion about the pension landscape. We're not qualified to give you financial advice or licensed, and we should just make that clear. But lots of you have been getting in touch about today's topic. Mark says, I was encouraged to pay into a private pension, then the government introduced the lifetime allowance. who's to say the allowance won't be lowered again and catch out many more people? Steve says people will not save when they know their savings will be inflated away by a government that prints money like water. Adrian says, I thought the government brought in that everyone in employment had to take out a pension. They certainly did. That's the auto-enrolment pension, which we referenced during our discussion. Paul says you need to teach young people about money, and employers need to explain deferred pay to their employees. Compound interest should feature in basic maths education. I couldn't agree more with that one, and I think you too as well, Jasmine. You're nodding next to me. And Tricia says, thank you for covering this important subject in such forensic detail. We do try, Tricia, we do try. I'm in my 40s with lots of little pensions from various jobs and would love to know some secure ways to find out what I have now, what I can expect when I retire, and how to combine these pots into something more substantial in the fullness of time. Merry Christmas, Tricia. Get yourself an independent financial advisor to help you to collate those various different pensions. This is an important topic for many of you, as we can see. I've noted it. We will return to this subject here on The Money. You're watching On The Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, it's today's Money Talks interview with Alex Shepherd. He's the CEO of UK-based health company Vatic, and he'll be revealing how his businesses adapted during COVID-19 and why predictive home testing could help stop future pandemics. But first, it's the GB News headlines once more with Rosie Wright.
I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. The Chancellor has pledged £1 billion to support businesses most impacted by Omicron across the UK. It includes a one-off £6,000 grant for hospitality and leisure firms in England. The government's also going to cover statutory sick pay for those who test positive or have to self-isolate for small and medium-sized employers in the UK. £30 million is going to be added to the Culture Recovery Fund to help museums and theatres in England. The Labour Party have welcomed the measures but say they should have been introduced earlier. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon is due to give an update this afternoon on any further restrictions after an increase in daily COVID cases. Meanwhile, in England, new COVID restrictions are unlikely to be introduced before Christmas, but the Prime Minister says the government won't rule out further action. The man accused of terrorism and of fatally stabbing Conservative MP Sir David Amess has pleaded not guilty. Ali Harbour Ali is charged with the murder of Sir David during a constituency surgery in Essex in October. The 25-year-old is also charged with preparing acts of terrorism between May 2019 and September of this year. A full trial is expected to be held in March. Now, the Big Ben will finally chime on New Year's Eve with all faces of the famous clock tower on display for the first time in 4 years. The Elizabeth Tower and the bell mechanism have undergone the biggest restoration project in their 160-year history. The bell is going to be struck 12 times to mark the start of 2022 as the project to restore Westminster Elizabeth Tower nears its end. You are up to date. I'll have more for you at 2 o'clock.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. Now, earlier we broke the news about a £1 billion payment from Her Majesty's Treasury to support businesses most impacted by Omicron across the UK in hospitality and leisure. And here's Chancellor Rishi Sunak relaying that statement.
Well, I know the current situation is very difficult, especially for those in the hospitality industry. So today we're announcing 3 new measures to help people and businesses. Firstly, we're announcing £1 billion in financial grant support, which means eligible hospitality companies will be able to claim a cash grant worth up to £6,000. Secondly, we're providing £30 million to top up our successful Cultural Recovery Fund to support institutions like theatres and museums. And lastly, we're reintroducing our statutory sick pay rebate scheme so that small and medium-sized companies can claim compensation for the government for the costs of sick pay for their employees. Taken together, I'm confident that these measures will help hundreds of thousands of businesses and the millions of people that they employ.
These are the restrictions as they stand at the moment. The Prime Minister was expected to announce some tightening. He didn't. This is the support on offer now. If there are further restrictions announced, will there be more support on offer?
Well, people will be able to look at our track record over the last year or two in supporting people and businesses, especially in the hospitality industry, throughout this crisis. Now, of course, I will always respond proportionately and appropriately to the situation that we face. People can have confidence in that. But where we are now, we've responded, I think, generously today. The grants that we've outlined, up to £6,000, are comparable to the grants that we provided for hospitality businesses when they were completely closed earlier this year. So there's a benchmark for you. Also, it's important to remember we have support already in place that lasts all the way to next spring. So, for example, a reduced rate of VAT for the hospitality and tourism sectors, and this year they are benefiting from a 75% discount on their business rates bill. Those types of things last all the way to next March to support the industry.
For people watching this and thinking, what can I do to plan my holiday period? Can you rule out any further tightening of restrictions this side of the new year?
I absolutely appreciate people's frustration with all of this. I'd refer people to the Prime Minister's words yesterday, and unfortunately we're just dealing with an enormous amount of uncertainty at the moment, and what the Prime Minister said is that we're reviewing the data day by day, hour by hour, keeping the situation under constant review, but can't rule anything out.
Will you recall Parliament if you make further restrictions?
Well, you heard the Prime Minister made that commitment in Parliament recently.
Okay, and a final one. December is such a crucial month for some of the industries that you're trying to support. You spent £300 billion supporting business so far. Does this extra £1 billion really acknowledge the importance of this one month? It feels like a bit of an afterthought.
Well, if you look at the grants that we're providing today, up to £6,000 for hospitality businesses, they are comparable in generosity to the grants that were provided when these businesses were fully closed, completely closed earlier this year. It's worth £1 billion, so it's a very significant amount of support. And on top of that, it's important to remember that there is existing support in place for hospitality businesses. They're benefiting currently from a reduced rate of VAT. That lasts all the way through to March, and also this financial year, a 75% discount on their business rates bill. Again, a benefit that lasts all the way through to March. So I think taken together, the steps we've announced today will help hundreds of thousands of hospitality businesses and the millions of people that they employ.
Chancellor Rishi Sunak there announcing the latest government support measures for businesses in hospitality and the leisure sectors. Now, in the last hour, the man accused of killing the MP Sir David Amess in October has pleaded not guilty to charges of murder and preparing acts of terrorism at his first hearing at the Old Bailey. Our London reporter Alice Porter is outside the court. Hi, Alice. Remind us of the events that led up to this court case.
Yeah, well, if we think back to the 15th of October, Sir David Amess, the MP for Southend West, was just going about his normal day-to-day business as a politician. He was at his constituency clinic in Leigh-on-Sea, meeting members of the public, when he was suddenly and multiple times stabbed. The emergency services were called, but sadly he was pronounced dead at the scene just after 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And there was a huge outpouring of grief, very much locally, but also across the political spectrum and nationally as well, because he'd been an MP for almost 40 years, and a very high profile and very moving funeral was held at Westminster Cathedral for him. And so this trial, this case, it's very significant, not just because of who he was as a politician, but the manner in which he was killed.
What do we know about the accused who's pleaded not guilty today?
Well, Ali Harbour Ali is a 25-year-old British man whose father was once a former advisor to the Somali Prime Minister. He lives in North London in Kentish Town, and it's alleged that he travelled from North London, got a train and then made an appointment to see the late MP at his constituency, allegedly because he said he was going to be moving to the area, and it's alleged that it was there that he stabbed the MP multiple times. What we do know is that he was arrested at the scene. Now, we also know that Mr Ali was referred on to the Prevent anti-radicalisation programme as a teenager. However, it is important to stress he was not thought to have been on the radar of the security service MI5.
And what more can you tell us, Alice, apart from the fact that the accused has pleaded not guilty?
Yeah, so the two charges that were put in front of him today, he's accused of murdering Sir David Amess, but he's also accused of preparing for acts of terrorism between the 1st of May of last year to the 28th of September of this year. And the court heard today that that included, allegedly, a reconnaissance of different locations, that included the Houses of Parliament, and as well as looking at the dresses of different MPs. But we've heard today that he's pleaded not guilty to both charges. The judge who is presiding over the case, that's Mr Justice Sweeney, he appeared today via a video link and has given a new date for the trial, which will be the 21st of March of next year.
Alice Porter, GB News London correspondent at the Old Bailey. Time now for my daily interview series. Here it is. It's Money Talks. Now, my guest today is Alex Shepherd, the co-founder and CEO of the UK-based health company Vatic. Vatic was founded in October 2019, before the COVID pandemic, and initially sought to test and diagnose a variety of illnesses. When the pandemic hit, though, Vatic saw an opportunity to help tackle the global pandemic. The company began creating a rapid antigen test called Know Now, which uses a saliva sample to identify COVID-positive people before they become highly infectious. And now Alex says he's on a mission to reshape healthcare, as he believes predictive testing is the key to staying safe from a range of illnesses. He says self-testing could combat the world's top killers, such as heart disease and strokes, as well as the threat of millions of diseases that could become the next pandemic. Well, here to tell us more about the future of healthcare, it's Vatic CEO Alex Shepherd. Alex, thanks a lot for joining me here on GB News. You are my latest Money Talks guest. Before we get on to life, the universe and everything, the big picture of healthcare, which I know you want to talk about, let's just talk a little bit about COVID testing. To what extent has the private sector in the UK responded to the need for testing, and how does it compare to other countries?
No, it's a good question. I think that the UK has responded extraordinarily well on the testing front. We've actually seen, an enormous amount of funding going to testing, and actually, I suppose the government take an unusual role within that area through the creation, effectively, a kind of a monopsony, in effect, with kind of free tests delivered to people's homes in a way you don't really see in other countries, where the private sector has been allowed to dominate, and actually in some areas that's had somewhat mixed results. So I think it's been really good to see that testing has been relied on, because I think with regard to pandemic response, you're only as good as, I suppose, the three prongs with which you can kind of keep it at bay, which is vaccine testing and mask wearing and other such kind of behavioural measures that people can take.
I have to ask you, Alex, a lot of families are mightily cheesed off that PCR testing in particular is so expensive. It seems so much more for a hard-working British family to get tested to go on holiday and to come back than their French, German, Spanish counterparts. Would you acknowledge that testing has been expensive for ordinary families here in the UK? And if you do acknowledge that, why is it?
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of the use of PCR has been because governments have required that as the essentially kind of gold standard for entry into other countries. I think one thing that we need to see a lot more of is a diversification in the types of tests that you can use to travel with. For example, lateral flow testing as one example, or home PCR testing is another, can be supplied a lot cheaper than some of these lab tests where you're effectively, paying for the overheads of a laboratory just to go on a holiday, which just doesn't seem right. So I think we want to look at how we can do that, because as we move into this phase where, COVID-19 becomes a somewhat permanent endemic fixture globally, we need to find a way to travel much more cost effectively. And I think that really comes through the regulatory side and through airlines working with government to ensure that different types of more cost effective measures can be used to allow people to travel. Because for sure, I completely agree with your point that the way that PCR testing has been used in travel has been overpriced.
In fairness to you, Alex, you didn't set up your business to take advantage of the COVID-19 situation. No. Batik existed before the pandemic, as we made clear earlier. So what's your bigger picture beyond COVID of the extent to which home testing can help people as our healthcare system becomes increasingly burdened to diagnose and take preventative early measures across a variety of diseases, heart disease, strokes, not just respiratory viruses?
Oh, absolutely. I think we see a lot of inequalities within healthcare. And, you can even just look at the way in which life expectancy in the north of England declined quite significantly during the pandemic in a way that wasn't reflected in other parts of the country. And I think really we have to try to equalise this. Also, create a sort of equitable access to health information that can allow people to make good decisions about how they live their lives, but also have support in dealing with that. We see that, of course, there's the risk of hospitals being overwhelmed, but actually the silent problem here really is in primary care, where actually the resources to look after our population are really limited. It's really challenging to scale because it's always based on essentially labour and the time of GPs to support people. So what really our mission is in Batik is not just to release some cool new technology, it's really to use technology as a vehicle to help drive social and in here kind of healthcare change, to allow clinicians to essentially manage their patient populations better, but also really empower people to know, what's wrong with their health. I mean, just an example we've seen in coronavirus, we've suddenly trained the entire population of the country almost in how to test for a really serious disease in their own home. And actually to say, look at this rather than as, a kind of cost of the pandemic, a problem. Actually, this could create a really interesting opportunity where actually suddenly we could be ready to almost move things forward quite substantially in terms of access to health data and empowering people to protect themselves.
So lay out the vision for me, Alex. Yes, we've all fiddled around on our kitchen tables with those pesky lateral flow tests and all the rest of it. But how could home testing revolutionise healthcare? What was your vision before this pandemic, this COVID pandemic even began, of how home testing can mean that people, without having to go to hospital, without huge pieces of equipment, can self-diagnose, if you like, early for other conditions apart from respiratory viruses?
So I think really what we'd look to do here is to support with essentially remote patient management for a lot of kind of chronic diseases and also early surveillance of key biomarkers, especially as people get older. We often have this thing where you might check in with, your GP or you might have a raft of tests carried out at a certain time in one's life. But actually, some of this could be done much more proactively and much more regularly. So, for example, prior to the pandemic, we'd actually deployed our technology looking at inflammatory markers as a way to identify early exacerbations within, say, chronic disease in that space, such as COPD, IBD, even things like psoriasis, to try to support clinicians with the management of patients that ordinarily are managed symptom first. So a lot of these patients, are managed. Something goes wrong, they're then triaged or sent to hospital. Actually, we could look at an environment where a lot more patient care can be done in the community. People can be kept at home for longer and kept healthier there, where it's much more comfortable for people. It's a lot easier for them to manage their own life, and that is just generally, keeps people happier. But also because there's much more information on how they're getting on over weeks and months, you have more data points with which to know what good looks like. And this really facilitates doctors with regard to their management of patients in the community, but also gives people a lot more agency with regard to the management of their conditions. We've even started seeing this come through. I know it sounds very simple, but even something like an Apple Watch is pretty powerful in the sense that it can give you lots of insights you wouldn't have ordinarily. But with VATIC, what we're proposing is, what if you could get access to information that's inside of your body, not just heart rate, really important markers that relate to acute disease, whether that's an alien virus in your body or whether it's actually proteins that are indicative of an acute disease state. And I think this really not only empowers people, but I think actually makes healthcare fundamentally much more equal in its distribution, and hopefully also keeps people healthier and at home for longer.
Very interesting, Alex. So VATIC's vision is one of lots of home testing, diagnoses earlier, less immediate pressure on the healthcare system in order to have a healthier population. Very, very interesting. VATIC CEO Alex Shepherd there, my latest Money Talks guest. Thanks a lot for joining us here on The Money, Alex. Before we end the show today, I just wanted to say we've had a huge response to our discussion on pensions saving. Never let it be said that these issues are not interesting to a broad range of people, because they certainly are. So here's some more emails from you. Madge says, what about the abysmal interest rates on savings accounts? Couldn't agree more, Madge. We pensioners are being ripped off because our savings are shrinking at an alarming rate. Judith says, why aren't companies held accountable for encouraging employees to change their pension arrangements and often losing out on money they would have had for their old age? Via Twitter, Andrew says, I'm 54 and I couldn't care less. I'm going to have to carry on working until I die. Retirement's an impossible dream, so I'm going to enjoy life and spend while I'm here. Andrew speaks for many there. Mike says inheritance tax avoidance is key. I gifted early to my children and then have to live for 7 years for this to be tax exempt. Even though I've already paid tax on these amounts, this is double taxation, which is supposedly not allowed. Sharon emailed us, I have paid into a work pension for years and probably will not benefit from it, as I don't own a house and will need to use any work pension to pay the rent. And Joyce says many people on minimum wage pay can't afford to live and save. And that's not only the young. Absolutely, Joyce. 15 million people, as I said, a third of all adults have no retirement savings at all. Thank you as ever for all of your comments. You've been watching On The Money with me, Liam Halligan. Thanks for joining me today. I'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. for more business, economics and consumer news. I'll be back in just a moment with Anaya for another hour. But this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On The Money.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there and welcome to your Tuesday forecast. Here are your headlines. Generally a lot of cloud today, a few showers lurking across the far north of Scotland, but we will see some brighter moments. High pressure still in charge just for Tuesday before things become a bit more mobile from the west through Wednesday and into the Christmas weekend. And what that means, outbreaks of rain.